Welcome to Have You Read It, the channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Today, we're exploring Robert Kagan's powerful and thought-provoking book, A Time to Die: The Rise and Fall of American Liberalism. This isn't just another historical analysis, it's a warning siren for American democracy, exploring the deep roots of the current political crisis and offering a chillingly plausible scenario for the future. Kagan argues that the current political divide in the U.S. isn't just a surface-level squabble between Republicans and Democrats. It's a fundamental clash between two opposing traditions, liberalism and anti-liberalism. This battle, he claims, has been raging since the birth of the Republic and is now coming to a head. The book starts by examining the radical liberalism of the American Revolution. Kagan reminds us that the Founders' Declaration of Universal Natural Rights was a truly revolutionary concept, a departure from centuries of tradition where rights were tied to specific groups, not all mankind. He points out that this revolutionary liberalism was not an inevitable product of the Enlightenment, or of Western culture, or even the English Constitution, but rather a product of unique circumstances and ideas. He emphasizes that liberalism itself is a choice, a faith, not a preordained endpoint of history. But here's the twist. Alongside this revolutionary liberalism, a dissenting anti-liberal tradition emerged. Kagan shows how this countercurrent, fueled by those who rejected the idea of universal equality, particularly slaveholders and their supporters, has persistently challenged the American experiment. This anti-liberal strain has manifested in various forms throughout American history, from the slave-holding South to the Ku Klux Klan, McCarthyism, the John Birch Society, the Christian nationalist movement, and now the Trump movement. Kagan traces the evolution of this anti-liberal tradition, emphasizing the slave-holding South as its epicenter. He illustrates how the South's dependence on slavery and white supremacy made it inherently anti-liberal, rejecting the very principles of universal rights upon which the nation was founded. He highlights how the Constitution, despite its liberal aims, contained compromises that protected slavery, setting the stage for future conflict. He describes how, in the decades leading up to the Civil War, Southern leaders increasingly repudiated the Declaration of Independence and embraced an anti-liberal ideology that justified slavery and white supremacy. Even after the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, Kagan demonstrates, the anti-liberal tradition did not disappear. He portrays how the South, though defeated, continued its fight against liberalism, seeking to restore white supremacy through violence, Jim Crow laws, and by maintaining control of the Democratic Party. Kagan emphasizes the role of the common white Southerner, not just the elite slaveholders, in this continued resistance. Beyond the South, Kagan exposes the persistence of anti-liberal sentiments in other forms, particularly anti-Catholicism and anti-immigrant nativism. He explains how in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the influx of immigrants triggered a resurgence of nativism, fueling efforts to define America as a white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant nation. He notes the rise of eugenics and other scientific justifications for racism during this period, highlighting the tension between these views and the liberal principles of the founding. The rise of the Klan in the 1920s, he says, was not just a Southern phenomenon, but a national expression of this anti-liberal sentiment. The mid-20th century, with the Depression, World War II, and the burgeoning civil rights movement, brought a resurgence of liberalism. Kagan shows how these events, along with the growing political power of immigrant groups and Black people, created a powerful coalition that pushed for greater equality. He emphasizes the role of Black activists in challenging the status quo and the impact of their sacrifices on moving the conscience of the nation. Figures like Franklin D. Roosevelt and Lyndon B. Johnson, initially not staunch civil rights advocates, were swept along by this liberal wave. But the fight was far from over. Kagan explores the rise of the new right in the mid-20th century, a conservative intellectual movement that actively opposed the core principles of American liberalism, often under the guise of preserving tradition. He points out how figures like William F. Buckley Jr., while claiming to defend a Burkean conservatism, actually sought to uphold white supremacy and limit the power of the federal government. He links this new conservatism to the older anti-liberal tradition. Kagan then examines how, despite this conservative resurgence, anti-liberalism remained a minority force in both parties until the 1980s, with figures like Eisenhower and Nixon representing a more moderate liberal conservatism. The Reagan years saw a revival of conservative influence, but Reagan himself, Kagan argues, was not a true anti-liberal. The seeds of the present crisis, Kagan suggests, were sown in the decades following Reagan, as the Republican Party increasingly became the home of anti-liberal forces. The election of Barack Obama, the first black president, acted as a catalyst, triggering a resurgence of white identity politics and fueling the Tea Party movement. He notes the rising influence of Christian nationalism during this period, highlighting its inherent anti-liberalism and its aim to create a Christian commonwealth. The rise of Donald Trump, Kagan argues, represents the culmination of this long-simmering anti-liberal rebellion. Trump's appeal, he notes, was not primarily economic, but racial and cultural, tapping into white anxieties about a changing America. Trump's willingness to flout norms and attack the liberal establishment made him the perfect vehicle for this anti-liberal movement. His supporters view him as their savior, their retribution against the liberal elite. Kagan's analysis isn't just historical, it offers a disturbingly plausible scenario for the future, arguing that the 2024 election is a referendum on the future of American liberal democracy. He suggests that, regardless of the outcome, the system is in danger. If Trump wins, he warns, the country faces the prospect of an anti-liberal tyranny. If he loses, the possibility of national dissolution looms large as Trump's supporters refuse to accept the result and potentially defy the federal government. Kagan's central argument is not that the American system is inherently flawed, but that it cannot survive without a shared commitment to its core principles. He warns that the current Republican Party, now firmly in the grip of anti-liberalism, poses a fundamental threat to the constitutional order. He calls on Americans to recognize the gravity of the moment and fight for the preservation of their liberal democracy. So, what are the main takeaways, the heuristics we can carry with us from this book? First, American liberalism is not inevitable. It's a choice, a fragile construct that requires constant vigilance and defense. Second, anti-liberalism is not a fringe phenomenon. It's a deeply rooted tradition that has always been a part of the American story and is now ascendant. Third, the current political crisis is not just about policy disagreements. It's a fundamental clash between two opposing worldviews, a battle for the soul of America. Fourth, the 2024 election is not just another contest between Republicans and Democrats. It's a referendum on the future of American liberal democracy. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.